Okay, well then let's start. So yeah, hello everyone. Welcome to day 5 of AirCon. We've already got one behind us, so this is the second one of today, and I am joined by my close friend and amazing sound designer and composer with the best webcam setup. I mean, you've stolen that from me. It's here in the script. David Fairfield. Thank you, David, so much for being here. We hang out regularly and do these chats. We've been friends for quite a while now, and so it's really cool to kind of do one of these live, I guess, sharing with with the audience. Yeah, what would you describe them as, I guess?
Well, I mean, it's fun seeing the chat, and I don't know how many people are joining us live, but this is really going to be an opportunity for us as creatives, as audio folks, to just like sit down, hang out, and discuss things that we care about. Like Greg mentioned, we have these conversations pretty regularly, and I find that there's just such a benefit from taking the scenic route on certain topics. Like, we can all go to YouTube and look through and find videos that have, here's 5 minutes to do EQing, here's 5 minutes to do compression, or here's how you can be better at marketing or branding, or, here's how you can build a business, whatever the slice of creativity you're heading into right now. Those are great. But the purpose of and the value of a conversation like this right now is for it to be a conversation, for it to be the scenic route, for it to be sort of a buffet of knowledge, for it to get sometimes into little side tangents that reveal a little nugget or something that you're like, I've been thinking about that, but nobody ever articulated it because it's not good in an algorithm. That's what this conversation is about. And so, Greg and I were chatting beforehand, and like our desire for you, we're like thinking about you while we're talking, and we're like, okay, what would be valuable for you? What would be good for your hero story? And that's kind of what we're doing today, which is a little unique from what we do in just our regular chats. But at the same time, I think it's going to be a fun time for everybody.
Definitely. And I think in our regular chats, just to clarify a little bit for everyone. So we've
Mm-hmm.
started we met on LinkedIn pretty much. You reached out to me, which is awesome. And you said that I think I had posted something about making game audio accessible to everyone, and you said that really resonates with me, kind of like let's connect, and then we got on a call, and then it
Mm-hmm.
turned into something that we did at the end of each month. And for me, it's been just an incredible experience in kind of clarifying my thoughts, learning
Mm-hmm.
amazing things, catching up with a friend as well. But yeah, I think like it's been a form of I guess mentorship, but in
Mm-hmm.
both ways.
Yeah,
Uh,
totally.
and and I just want to encourage as well people, even before we start off, just to get yourself someone, multiple people that you have regular kind of deep conversations that you can problem solve with,
Mm-hmm.
and be incredibly open.
Yeah, something that I so appreciate about you, Greg, and about this conference and about Airwiggles is that you care so much about community. And I've been in a lot of different industries. I've been in gaming for, I guess, about 15 years officially, maybe more than that. But seeing some other industries, even like film and TV, there have been moments where I encounter other industries where it's not as tight knit as what we have here within audio. And also for those who are within gaming specifically, it's not as tight knit as that. And there are definitely pockets of it in every industry. Everybody who's out there, good people, like they get to decide what culture they make. But we're so fortunate to be in this environment where we can have these conversations where there isn't like a hierarchy or whatever. Like, at least that's been my experience. And I so appreciate that about Greg, what you do and how you lead in this community. But then also, it's like we both get to benefit from this relationship. And now we have all these fantastic people in the chat and stuff. And, it's a real privilege basically to be a part of this community in that way.
Yeah, 100%. And yeah, love what you said as well, Sarah. As an ex-teacher coming into game audio, it's an amazing community to be welcomed
Mm-hmm.
into. Truly agree. This community is one of a kind, and it's a positive feedback loop, you know? It's
Mm-hmm.
kind of you get back what you put into it, and everyone is putting positivity into it, and so everyone's getting it back. So that's just beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Well, David, I think it will be awesome for people to get to know you a little bit better. So if you could maybe share a little bit about yourself and your background in audio and in games.
Yeah, I'm sometimes cautious in sharing these things because it's like accolades or like who cares? But what I'm hoping is that by setting a bit of the table of like who am I, where did I come from, what do I do, what are some of the quote unquote successes that I've had. This is just a way to possibly rapidly earn trust with you. And trust is a topic that we're probably going to be going into later. And so I'm sort of signaling a bit of what we will be talking about in terms of whenever you are entering into a professional or personal relationship with someone, the foundation of that is often trust. There are other elements to be sure, but it's trust. And so as a version of doing that, of speaking into the void and kind of saying like, why should you care? Why should you maybe consider listening to me? I'll give you the background story on me. So, um, kind of did the whole playing in bands and doing that kind of thing as a teenager, never really found a fit for all this music I was just making on the computer. And then eventually I was working with Disney on a game called Club Penguin. And I saw for the first time in real life, like a composer who made this funny, quirky, silly music stuff. And he was using a computer. And I saw that like there's a space for me and what I do there. And so I worked with Disney for a decade, worked my way into a lot of different positions. And eventually I was on the audio team as a full-time composer and I was learning sound design and that kind of a thing. And so with Disney, I worked on like 7 or 8 different titles. I composed over 300 minutes of music with them. We got nominated for a Gang Award for the first game that I was full-time composing on for best audio in a casual game or best music in a casual game, I think it was. And got to speak at GDC. And this just kind of like launched me into this career that I'd desired for a long time and didn't know how to transition into, which we'll talk about that probably in a little bit. And then eventually transitioned into it. And then in 2018, the studio I was working with specifically got shut down, which is a common thing in games. A studio comes up, studio goes away, especially within bigger organizations. And that launched me into freelance. And suddenly there was this new topic of like not just making the thing, like the widget, the Airwiggle, not just making the thing, but also what is it to be a personal brand? What is it to build a company? What are systems and processes required for that? And I was really fortunate that it went really well. There was definitely a period of time where I was straddling between a part-time job and going full-time into audio, which we can talk about that cutover as well, because I didn't want to gamble on that transition, knowing that I had so much I needed to learn. But eventually it was full-time. That was in 2020, became full-time in my freelance business. And then it just skyrocketed. And in, what was it, like April 21, I brought on my first contractor to test out what is it to lead people. Can I do that effectively? Because there's a new skill to add to the tool belt. And that person who started as my first contractor is now an employee with my company. And I've since been able to work with, around 8 different contractors that we regularly get to make stuff together. And so that's the kind of journey. It's like this up and to the right kind of a journey. But we'll get into the details of this of like, okay, for you, maybe you're trying to transition from, I have a day job that's not in audio and I want to get there. Or maybe I'm in audio and I'm considering a leadership role. Or maybe I'm considering freelance, but I'm scared about that. I've never done business before. We'll have the opportunity to jump into that stuff. And if you're in the chat, feel free to inform the conversation there. Greg's going to be monitoring that and we'll see what we can touch point on. How'd I do, Greg? Was that
Amazing. We've
what else
got
do
a
you want
lot
me to
of
cover?
a lot of Club Penguin fans as well, which is
Oh,
cool.
fun. Yeah, that's great.
Yeah. No, that's awesome. I mean, it's really interesting as well, obviously, going from kind of in-house to freelance and then becoming sort of an employee yourself,
Yeah.
and giving other people the opportunity, and also in training them and yeah, just their break, the
Yeah.
opportunity to have their break. And I think that's incredibly important in this industry as well, because it then gives back again to the next generation and so on
Yeah.
and so forth.
And I just realized, sorry, I forgot to mention, you might have, from what I just shared, you might have thought like, oh, you were working with Disney, went into freelance, and then that was kind of it in terms of the projects you were working on were like top tier or whatever. And like this is stupid because I'm like me, trust me. But the since heading into freelance and then building the business, I've been able to work with Minecraft Legends came out recently, which is fantastic. It's a really fun thing. And then there's Disney Mirrorverse. I worked with the Olympics. I worked with Warner Brothers doing their Harry Potter Magic Caster Wand, and like just to kind of preface that a little bit of that, even though I went into freelance, it wasn't like suddenly now I'm doing bottom tier. Bottom tier isn't fair. It's like still big projects, but then it's also indie projects as well. So that's kind of the fun that comes with freelance as well, is like you're able to build up a brand and tap into those high tier stuff. And sometimes the most fun is kind of the mid tier, like indie stuff or mid-sized studios, because you have more creative control and that kind of thing. So all that to say, things have gone well, I guess. Trust me. I don't know. Anyways, sorry.
I think that's great, though. It's totally true, because I think a lot of people aspire to be in AAA because
Mm-hmm.
of in the what it means in terms of name
Yeah.
and credits and the vision, uh, yeah, and what people think that life looks like, when in fact it might actually be that you're working on just one specific thing for years. Maybe you're just doing ambiences on a very,
Mm-hmm.
very specific thing, or just this or that. And then when you're working on smaller projects, on indie projects, you often have a lot more creative freedom. The publishers aren't necessarily as tight on
Yes.
changing things or whatever. They don't have as much creative control because they
Yes.
don't hold as big of a wallet, because that's something that happens a lot in our industry, is publishers make decisions that are creative that they shouldn't be making. The devs should make it, but because they're holding
Yep.
the money, that
Yep.
sometimes happens. So it can be very tricky.
Let's
Um,
dive into this for a second here, because I think you've tapped into something that perhaps the people watching would find interesting. The kind of heading being, as I'm designing my career, when is AAA awesome? When is indie or mid studio or small studio awesome? Now, there's a lot of variability here based on what you desire. Like if you grew up and you were just playing like fighting style games and you just love the genre, then you'll just love it if it's indie. You'll love it if it's like you're working on Street Fighter or something like that. There's a good chance that you'll enjoy it no matter what. Where I think that AAA studios are really, really amazing for your career is, one, it helps you with your credibility in terms of you finish a game, you publish it, people recognize the name. That's good for your personal branding. Two, you're working in a professional environment. I didn't realize how the 10 years that I was spent with Disney would impact my entire life from the perspective of creative process, using things like Agile, using things like Jira, or whatever you use, Monday.com, ClickUp, or like whatever, to manage tasks, using systems and processes around my calendar, and managing my time and my energy well and effectively. Working with a big studio is going to teach you so much about creative process and practice. Even if you don't have the creative control, that by itself is like worth the ticket to admission. And plus, you get paid. How amazing is that? It's like schooling on a subject that would be difficult to go to school for. Mid tier or smaller level games are amazing because of what you described, Greg, where you have this creative flexibility where in a 5-minute conversation says like, what if we had like flying unicorns that like also dropped bombs, or like, could play music notes in the clouds or something? And you're like, I don't know, let's go make it. That's the kind of flexibility you generally don't get in a AAA environment. And it puts a lot of onus on you, because it's like, look, man, you're the one that has to speak to the audience. You're the one that has to decide if this is something they're going to resonate with. And you're not just following some creative rabbit trail, some shiny thing, but you have that freedom to go and do that. I find right now where I'm at, having done enough kind of accolade related projects, that I like finding the like slightly less than AAA tier projects where there's enough innovation involved that I can have a creative stake. So that's just where I'm at in my career. But I loved that, especially early on, I was working in these wider teams. There was a lot of clarity around how we work, what your role is. It was very specific. that was a good structure for me, especially when I was learning and growing at the beginning. So to whatever degree that might be helpful for you, just keep an eye towards like, what is motivating me in this season? What are the things I want to learn and grow in? And is AAA or mid tier or something indie, like one developer with a cool concept? What do you want to go after?
I absolutely love that. And I think it's very interesting as well. As I work for an outsourcing company, we work with kind of all of the different clients that you've just described, from
Mm-hmm.
big AAA to, mobile, 2 week kind of turnaround casual games and stuff like that. And it's really interesting to also see each of these different workflows and how teams interact with each other and all of that. And so I think that in itself is a huge learning experience, and especially when it comes to huge AAA, in because there's so many people involved, like you said, it has to be a well-oiled machine, otherwise the game won't get made, because there's so many people involved and there's so much
Mm-hmm.
to do. So definitely it's awesome to gain some insight into that and then take that away into maybe other areas.
Yeah. Caleb in the chat mentioned another benefit of AAA games. He said that because the team is a bit bigger, you can have a super close community of peers and learn and collaborate with them. I think that that's absolutely true. The idea of rubbing shoulders with people who are in our industry is incredibly challenging when you're just an indie game and it's so small that you're the only audio resource, and suddenly you're like, I guess I'm the music composer today. Maybe that's not your discipline. And you're like, I guess I got to handle that or source it or whatever. I guess I'm doing the voiceover today because we don't have budget to hire someone. It can be a little isolating when you're in that environment, which is why I think Airwiggles is so fantastic, and being able to engage with the community in that regard. I got to be cautious. It'll look like you're paying me, Greg, to like promote Airwiggles, but no, it's this is why it's so cool to have this community, because whether you're with a AAA studio and you've got a bigger audio team, or you're just running solo, which is common, you'll be able to find peers and rub shoulders and have community.
Yeah, and at the same time, I think on the other end of the spectrum, obviously with freelance, that can also be really cool because you get to wear all the hats and you get to become really good at a lot of different things. And in fact, later on, there's a talk from John who's going to talk a little bit about more about being a generalist. But the thing I want to get at as well is it's so cool because you can really carve your own career path.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously that also kind of can go from freelancer into making your own company. And that's one of the things that you did. I would love to know what were some of the biggest challenges and also takeaways from doing that.
Okay. So let's just talk about transition seasons as a topic in general, and then that's going to launch us into a couple different paths. When you are working a job, I'm sure that there are some people who are watching this that they are working a job that doesn't relate to the creative career that they desire. You're sort of like a person on a boat, and there's this dock that you want to get to, which is like, I want to be full time in this thing. And as you get closer to it, some people are like, actually, I think, Greg, this was your story. You just jumped off the boat and like, well, I have to swim for 30 feet to get to the dock or whatever. And that's one option. The option that I went for was like, I needed the boat and the dock to be close enough so that I could safely step across. Now, what does that look like? If you're working a job that isn't in the creative field that you want to be in, ultimately it's just paying the bills. You might enjoy it, but it's just paying the bills. Um, you need to be laser focused on what your goals are. You need to be laser focused on what your budget is. This is something we don't talk about. This isn't YouTube video worthy. This isn't good for that format. Having a budget is probably one of the best gifts I had for making that transition, because I knew what my burn rate was. I knew what I had in savings and how long it would take me. Well, okay, I'll get into a practical story on that front. And then this transitions very nicely into how I went from full time with Disney to launching into freelance. So at the end of 2018, when my job ended with Disney, my life situation was this. I'm married, happily married. My wife, Laura, is amazing. And at the time, I had just one kiddo. Now I have two. And my daughter was 12 months old. And I was losing my job. My wife, she had a job to go back to after her leave that she was on. But she wanted to stay at home and be a stay-at-home mom, and I was in full support of that. But suddenly, I don't have a job to support our family. What are we going to do? So we looked at our finances. We had 3 to 6 months worth of savings for this express purpose of, if the job went south, if something went bad, I had that to fall back on. But we knew that when I was launching into freelance, I was going to be learning so many new things. It wasn't just about making music or doing sound design anymore. There were so many new skills I needed, like accounting and taxes and organizational structure, like marketing and branding and outreach and client acquisition, and like all of that kind of stuff. That's a lot to take on. That's a new job by itself, a completely new job that I didn't have any experience in per se. Well, this phrase that helped guide us during that season, and the reason why in this case I didn't just jump off the boat and swim towards the dock, was because I realized that nothing killed creativity like desperation, and that my emotional mood, I don't know if any of you can relate to this, but my emotional mood can dictate how productive I am in a day. And that's both the gift and the curse of being a creative. In fact, the insurance industry knows this, and they tilt their insurance premiums for creatives towards mental health challenges. It's a real thing. You feel it probably, it, you see it. And so I knew if I just jump off this boat and I'm just swimming in the waters of launching into freelance and I don't know if I'm going to get a gig, then it also means that when I'm in a conversation with a client, I'm probably not going to be serving them anymore. I'm going to be serving me, which is I'm desperate. I'm like, how can I upsell you? How can I get more money? How can I undercut you? I knew that I would be compromised heading into those conversations. So what we decided to do instead, and this is where the boat, how do we get that boat closer to the dock? I took a job that paid a lot less than I was earning at Disney. It had some benefits, which was a plus, but it was only 30 hours a week. And I enjoyed the job, the people, it was awesome, but I knew it was a temporary stopgap. And it was just enough to stabilize our finances as a family so that when I was launching into freelance, I wasn't going into those conversations with desperation. I was going into it with service in mind. How can I serve you? I'm stable. I'm good. I'm able to tell you, I don't think this is a good fit for you. I don't think I can serve you the way that you need to. Why don't I introduce you to a few people who can? And it was that posture of peace and calm that helped my creativity. At first, I only had basically I was working 6 days a week, which for a season with having a young family and a spouse and everything was a lot. But I had 2 days to focus on the freelance business, and then I worked 4 days with this other company. And it was those 2 days that I had to be laser focused on how I was going to get towards full time and do it quickly because we knew that there was an expiration date on this arrangement. So eventually that was where it's like, okay, I'm getting my reps in. I'm getting those rhythms of what is it to run a business? What is it to post on LinkedIn? What is it to do client outreach? What is it to own the learning of being a creative in the freelance world? And then with a greater confidence, now it wasn't easy. I was like freaked out, so freaked out going through this process. But that gave me the confidence to be able to serve people effectively, to bring the skills that I had proven and that I had a track record of when I was at Disney. And then that led to job after job after job. And in some ways, I feel like I can't fully take the credit for it, but I was so blessed. I was so fortunate. I was so grateful that I had that opportunity to make that transition. And with the love and support of my wife and with the motivation of like, I got to provide for my family and so on, it gave me a lot of clarity in that season. And that was how I kind of made that transition. And then in March 2020, right as the pandemic hit the whole world, and I thought this is going to be the worst time to launch full-time into freelance, but that's when we cut over to full-time. And we were really fortunate that the trajectory just kept on heading upward. So I hope that gives you guys like a little snippet of like, if you're in a transition season, whether it's from, I'm moving from a job that I don't really want to be in to a creative career, or it's moving from an established job into a new season, which might scare you, like freelance. Maybe you didn't choose it like me. I didn't choose it. The whole studio got shut down. But in those transition seasons, knowing your budget, removing any kind of conflict of interest or compromise from your ability to serve people, and then going and doing good work. That's kind of how that looked like for me, at least.
That's some incredible advice right there. And yeah, I think a lot of people kind of oftentimes make the mistake of the yeah, jumping from the boat when it's so far away and the waves are potentially going to carry you away from the dock rather than towards it. So
Let's talk about this for you
yeah.
though. Was I correct that you did that, didn't you? You jumped from the boat.
Um so yeah, it was halfway. So for me it was kind of like I had to a certain extent
Mm-hmm.
because it was this situation of like either I'm gonna finish and because I a little bit of context, I had to stay
Mm-hmm.
in the UK because that's where the opportunities were, and I couldn't afford moving back to Austria, and there was no way I would make my way back to England because of finances. So it was like I'm staying here, and either I'm graduating and finishing university and going to work at McDonald's or something, which I
Uh-huh.
was doing. I was actually working at McDonald's,
Yeah.
and or I'm gonna do something that I really enjoy. And the hope was, to either be able to transition and to do part time and build it up, or to fully. And I was
Mm-hmm.
actually lucky enough to get a job offer after university, but it was very much I had two jobs going while I was at uni, and then
Mm-hmm.
and my degree wasn't even meant for game audio, so I kind of
Mm-hmm.
like put my degree to the side, focused hard on game audio, and very
Yeah.
much then like yeah, lots of fast breaststrokes and
Mm-hmm.
we got to the dock. But yeah, it was pretty intense for sure. And I would if people don't face a situation of where they have to really really make it work, I think like you know being able to go with the boat rather than jump into the
Mm-hmm.
water is a lot better, because you're otherwise potentially going to burn out.
Mm-hmm.
And that happens to so many people in the creative industries. And it also kind of low-key happened during my degree, where I just
Mm-hmm.
didn't really enjoy music anymore, and that was part of the reason why I transitioned to sound.
Mm. I think that something that I've seen in the chat here, um, there may be a bit of a question of um, how do you know? Like, how do you know when the boat and the dock are an appropriate distance for your life situation and where you're at to make that sort of transition, whether it be into a new role, into a new company, into a career that you're trying to launch into? Um, I'm a firm believer in the concept of organic growth. And this concept is basically, are you seeing anything? So we have a garden, and especially my daughter, just she's 5 now, and she just loves planting flowers, and her carrots are doing way better than my wife's. And we're like, I don't get it. She's green thumb. I don't get it. And when you're looking at just a pile of dirt and you're saying there's nothing here, if you transition then, that's maybe not the time for it. So what would the first, the seeds coming up, what does it look like for the crop to start coming in? One thing that was mentioned in the chat is, I think somebody said, I don't know if I've heard of a lot of people that can successfully just go into freelance as their first gig because they don't know anyone. So I think one of the organic markers for like, is this thing going to bear fruit? Is this thing going to lead to a crop? Is, do you have relationships established within the industry? Because if you don't, it's going to be really tough, because the only thing, well, okay, now we're getting into another concept, but people work with those that they know, like, and trust. The knowing is, do you have a network of relationships? Not a network of connections, not a network of people you can use, a network of relationships. Because in our industry, it's all of it. I don't want to work with anybody that I don't have a relationship with. Now, that's not exclusionary. Like, I'm not going to clicky, I'm not going to let anybody in. But it's just like, hey, how do we develop a relationship? How do I get to know you? Then there's how do I get to like you? It's like, okay, do you see the organic growth, the organic starting point of like, people like me, they know me, they like me. That actually means you have to work on yourself sometimes. That means like you have to work on, as an introvert, it's like I've had to work a lot on how do I connect with other people? How do I practice connecting with other people when in some ways that drains me? And then trust being the last one, trust being, can they trust that you're able to do what you say you're going to do, that you're going to have follow through, but that you also have the skill level to get there? So if you're working at McDonald's and saying, hey, I want to get into sound design, I need people to know, like, and trust me. how do you target each of those things and see enough organic growth in each of those that you can be effective? So let's talk about trust for a second, the third one. How can someone trust that you are going to deliver what they need from a creative perspective? Well, you need to have a demo reel. Like, that's the starting point. I'll share a little story here. When I was working at Disney, I was in quality assurance for a season, which was great because I got to learn systems, processes, get to know the people, which a lot of those relationships led to my successes in freelance because they recommended me. But while I was doing that, I was like, how do I show the audio team that they can trust me? They know me, they like me, but how can they know that they can trust me? Well, there was an audio director there, Nick Glant, who was just fantastic and such a good friend of mine now. And he said to me once, he was like, "Hey, I would love to see your demo reel." And that was like a huge motivator for me because I was like, I don't have a demo reel. Like, I've worked on tons of audio stuff, but I don't have a demo reel. And for me, it was an audience of one, putting together a little website, putting together a demo reel, cobbling it together. I took like commercials, stripped out the audio, and then redid the audio and the voiceover and stuff because I didn't have enough to have a proper demo reel. I didn't have any experience in a professional sphere actually doing it, for money. And I was like, that was a way for me to develop that trust factor. And when he saw it, it was like, okay, cool. Like, let's see what opportunities there are for you. So, when do you make that transition? Just by way of summary, you need to have organic growth that you can point to. And in particular, I encourage you to look at, do people know me, like me, and trust me? And I'm not meaning like and as any manipulative factor of like, I'm going to go out there and I'm going to fake it. Our industry is way too small for you to make it by faking it. You can fake it in your skill set sometimes, but you can't fake it in your relationships. You can't fake it in your connecting with other people. And if that's going to push you towards, I need some personal development, like I need to grow as an individual, then go and do that. Now, at least you have your assignment for the next season.
Yeah, for sure. I I I wholeheartedly agree with that, and it's all the people that I usually see also getting the jobs and stuff.
Mm,
They often are the people that show up and like in person, but also online, just be there, show their face, and they become known. And then it's like, this person, they're always here, they're showing up, they're clearly committed, and then the rest is obviously like skills and all of that.
mm-hmm.
But then it's like, right, this person is now, they are part of the industry, they are part of the community, and eventually that transition will happen. And I think it's definitely kind of also a lot smarter to do it without getting wet if you can. So yeah, like side jobs are totally fine. It can take,
Totally.
especially when you're freelancing, like at the start, it can take a long time to transition. And there's nothing wrong with kind of you know doing working at McDonald's or Tesco's or anything.
Yes.
And it's even better, I think. Aaron mentioned this at some point where yeah, Aaron said, well put, I focused on getting a day job I prefer, and now I can
Mm-hmm.
operate in my creative audio stuff with less desperation. Short-term move
Yes.
for long-term win.
Yeah.
100%.
And in
That's
terms of like what
Yeah.
job you can take as you're making that transition, usually you're looking for time freedom. So that's why I mentioned budgeting earlier, because if you're able to be really laser focused on your budget and you're like, cup of noodles, like don't sacrifice your health entirely, but like if you can utilize your resources efficiently on the home front so that you can liberate your time to focus on getting your reps in, building that know, like, and trust with, the wider community and that kind of thing, then you're accelerating your path. Whereas if you're sloppy with your budget, you're desperate and fearful because your finances are a hot mess, then it's like, get that stuff in order now because it's going to be an accelerant to you as you head into that transition.
Yeah, for sure. And in terms of like the job thing for me as well, so my second job was working at the coffee shop in the student union, and as I worked my way up to assistant manager, eventually I was mostly in the office, and then in the office, a lot of the time I didn't have much to do, and my
Mm,
boss was really nice, so she was like, "Yeah, you can do whatever." And
cool.
so I obviously had my laptop with me and read things, watched videos, made sound design stuff in my DAW. And then I got put into the uni building, the second one where There was like lots of microphones and studios, and they had to have someone there
Hmm.
to lend those out and look at the unlock the studios and this and that. And
Hmm.
that again was like I was just there to be there most of the time, so I could do whatever I want. And that was again tons of time that I was actually getting paid that I could put into doing something that benefited me in terms of my long-term career path.
That's great. And like that talks a lot about your character as well, because people are knowing, liking, and trusting you within where you're working there. It wasn't audio related, but they're, well, eventually it was, but like they trust you enough to like give you permission to learn, grow, progress to you towards your goals as well. I see a question in the chat here from Jacob saying, what would you recommend for building connections when you're unsure where you'll be living in the next chapter of your life? So let's just talk briefly about seasons of life, because that factors in greatly to how easily you can move the boat and the dock together. I was in this season of life where I had a mortgage and a family to provide for. That meant it was a great motivator, but it meant like this is a serious move in our family. And like, should we even consider things like, I don't know, moving to a cheaper city so that the financial burden is less, or other things like that? That's certainly a consideration. I think that if you're in a position where you don't know where you're geographically going to be located in the next 6 to 12 months, then you know, it's good for you to have a local connection no matter where you are, because you don't know, that might turn into an opportunity. If you're in a city that already has an active game studio community or film community or something like that, you should be rubbing shoulders with them and using it in one of two ways. Either you're building those relationships and they are going to turn into something whether you stay in that location or not, or at the very least, and this might be a way for me as an introvert to just sort of hack my brain, saying like, you know what? It's a test run. I'm going to be here for 6 months and I'm going to try and be more ambitious, more forthright, more vulnerable, more intentional in relationship than I've ever been, because hey, in 6 months I'm going to move. What does it matter anyways? And I think that that'll grow you a lot personally, and it may surprise you how that increases the depth of relationship you have and the opportunities that may come from that. So I would say in whatever location you're in, try to be locally connected. However, we're Greg and I have never met each other in person. Most of the people I work with, I've never met in person. Over the last 3 to 5 years, the landscape of what relationship looks like from a geographic versus digital location perspective, it's completely changed. And so what I'd encourage you to do is just be a part of a community where there are the sort of people that you want to be working for, with, serving. Go and do that with an eye towards some in person and then some that's digital, because the digital one obviously is a little bit more transportable, but any of those in-person relationships you have, those can convert to a digital relationship too. So uh, it's all good. And especially I think a lot of people in our industry are introverted oftentimes. You got to push yourself, and you got to hack your brain. You got to get there and out there and start serving people and caring about them and caring about what they're interested in and their hero story and what you can bring to the table there. Ultimately, that's the kind of thing that I think lights up a career and makes it have opportunity.
Yeah, definitely. I think also that this whole conversation ties in really nicely with kind of the whole personal brand thing.
Mm-hmm.
And this is something that I often get asked a lot, especially from um, people also who are totally new. And it feels like on social media traditionally, thankfully on Airwiggles, this is not the case because you can see every post. You don't have to follow anyone. But when I first joined Twitter, like I had 0 followers. I didn't know who to follow. And same with LinkedIn type thing. It was like, okay, well, I'll connect with some audio people, but it all feels very much like a big void. And then you don't really have a lot of work behind your experience. And all of a sudden you're like told to, oh, now I have to create my personal brand and all
Mm-hmm.
of this stuff. For someone who's like more at the start of the journey, or even for people who are a little bit further along, what do you think in terms of like personal authentic brand and how we can build one?
Yeah. Two things come to mind: add value, find your voice. So let's talk about add value. Um, Naturally, I get a lot of people that reach out to me, and they're like, "Hey, give me opportunity," and that's fine. I understand. At a certain point, you're like, that's where you're kind of at, but you're not coming in with a visible posture of service. You're coming in with a not entitlement, because I get it. You have a need and you have to express that need. That's important to raise your hand and say, I'm available. But it's like, is there a way for you to add value? Now, what does that look like if you're just reaching out, like cold call kind of situation? This is not a breadth game. It's a depth game. Now, that's not true of every industry as it pertains to branding marketing. Um, Scammers obviously want to hit 1 million inboxes with their, you know, foreign prince
You
situation.
want to get into scamming?
If you want to get
Follow.
into scamming, I would consider not personal and breadth. If you want to get into a career with relationships at the foundation of it, I would suggest depth. Now, you don't have to be creepy about this or anything, but it's like, take some time to get to know someone and appreciate something that they're doing. Compliment them. That's free, and you can offer that. It only costs you your time. So if say that Greg and I, we didn't know each other, but I noticed him on LinkedIn and I was like, hey, I think there might be opportunities he has. So I am selfishly motivated. I'm like, I want work. I need work. I mean, I need to maybe even provide for my family. That's not selfish, is it? How do I start? Well, I'm going to be looking at his socials. I'm going to be looking at the things that he does. And I'm going to be seeing something that I just want to encourage and affirm, regardless of whether I work with him ever or not. I just want to say, hey, Greg, I've noticed that you've been making these videos on YouTube in our industry. I love it. I think you're so succinct at communicating some of these principles. And I hope that more people get access to this kind of thing. By the way, I saw this one video in particular, and there was something that really stood out to me. Really appreciate you, cheering for you from the sidelines. See you around. You know, it doesn't have to be like, gimme, gimme, gimme. Like, where's my opportunity, Greg? You don't know me. Where's my opportunity? So add value. That can start in the simple ways of just genuinely caring about someone and giving them encouragement. It can sometimes tilt towards, and we have to be cautious about this, where you're offering someone a solution. Now, especially at first, before your career is established, there is, again, the freedom of time you have is one of your greatest assets. So utilize that. So you could say to an artist, as an example, hey, you did this animation. I really love your animation style. I'm totally into that genre or style of that kind of thing. I was just having some fun with it this weekend. And like, here's a thing with sound design. I added sound design or music to your thing. Not expecting any credit or like anything. I just like, you're really cool. This is awesome. Do you mind if I share this on my socials or something like that? Now, you could also post that without asking them, but it's about relationship, right? Like, I'm trying to establish relationship with them. Every opportunity I have for an organic touch point like that, that's what I can tilt towards. And if they're a really talented artist, they're like, oh, this is so cool. I mean, man, thank you. And they post it on their socials. You post it on your socials. You guys get to have a little bit of a bromance for a moment there. And it's like, now you're a little bit in that relationship. Now, can you do that for 1,000 people and do it for breadth? No, you can't. So intentionally reach out to the people that you would like to work with, because people work with the people they want to work with. And if you feel like you kind of like connect with this type of person or the genre of creativity that they're into, see if you can reach out to them. The other thing is, if you're within audio, if you're reaching out to people who are just sound designers or just composers and they work for a company, there's a question of, can you offer something of value to them? Now, if it's an audio director, this is somebody who is a leader, who is often trying to fill their organization with people who are good people who can do certain genres of video games or certain types of audio, etc. So if you're able to reach out to them, you need to do something to stand out, because we'll just say they get 100 inbox things per week, especially if they recently posted saying, hey, we're looking for people. How are you going to stand out? Like, you can't think that you're just like showing yourself. You have to think that you are standing in a line with 1,000 people. What's going to make you actually stand out as somebody who is more knowable, likable, trustable, that is able to excel in that regard. An example of this, I heard of a guy who he was in LA. He just finished doing audio school for engineering to do bands and music and that kind of production stuff. So he graduates with a class of 20 people, I'm sure. Now there's 20 people who are exactly the same as far as the marketplace is concerned. They're exactly the same, and they're flung out into the marketplace at the exact same time. What did he do to stand out? Because there's at least 20 other people knocking on every studio, probably in the geolocation of their school, and saying, hey, I want to work with you. Again, they're saying, I want a job. And the studio's like, look, man, we get all of these applicants every single time. So what he did is he went and he got the best donuts in town and dropped off a box of those to 3 or 4 targeted studios with his resume, face, and everything there. And like, hey, I'm just dropping this off. Hope you have a great day. Love what you do. Now, of course, like everybody in that spot is going to be like, oh man, the best donuts in town. Motivation. Suddenly they are motivated to care about what you've done because you've offered value to them. It's in the form of a sugary treat, but you've offered value to them. Okay, let's talk about the other category. So we talked about adding value. Now finding your voice. When I started using LinkedIn in earnest, and it doesn't matter what platform it is, there's all different neighborhoods and they all have different ways of speaking, communicating, dialect, etc. I chose LinkedIn as my preferred platform because that's where I felt I'm looking for producers. I'm looking for game designers. I'm looking for developers of mid to high tier studios. That's where they're hanging out on the whole. There are other, neighborhoods that they hang out, but that was where I felt I could most effectively communicate with them. I was starting to post. I think at first it was once a week and then eventually twice a week. And then I did a 3-month period where I was posting 6 days a week. And that was about 2 things. One was offering value as much as I could. I was trying to put something out there that was valuable for others. Now, I was far enough in my career that I could say things like, if you are a game developer and you're looking for music, what are the best music licensing sites that you can get to? Now, you might say, why would you do that? You're a composer. Why would you tell them where, music licensing sites, like you're diverting work from your business? It's like, no, I'm not. If you've read the book Go Giver, I highly recommend it if you haven't. The idea is that you're generating reciprocity. You're adding value to the community, to the individual, and they then are able to look at you and be like, hey, you're somebody who adds value, even if it costs you something. Why did you do that? And now if they go and they navigate licensing sites, they might either find the music that they're looking for, or they say to themselves, this is too complicated. I can't find what I'm looking for. I need something unique. Who am I going to turn to? Oh, I remember that David guy. He's a composer. He has this experience and he's also generous with his time and expertise. Why don't I reach out to him? So, there was that adding value piece to it. But what about finding your voice? I found that well, first and foremost, I was terrified. Like every post, all the insecurities come out to hang out with me. They're like on the shoulder and around in the studio. They're like, yeah, people are going to think you're dumb. People are going to think they're going to notice you're a phony. They're going to know that you have no idea what you're doing right now. They're going to think that was too campy or too wholesome. They're going to think that, oh, that wasn't professional enough because you dived into your personal life. All of those voices crowding around. It's terrifying. But what I wrote a sticky note for myself and put it on my door so I'd see it regularly. And it was, do something today that scares you. Because I'm inherently like a sort of fearful person. I'm an introvert. Like there's a lot of reasons why I wouldn't get out there. I was like, okay, it scares me right now. Post, getting something out there. And through the process of posting, of monitoring the analytics and kind of seeing how does a post do, when does it do well, when does it not do, I started to find my voice. I started to find ways to better serve people. I started to find ways to talk about somebody else's hero story instead of puffing up my own hero story. And that's a whole mental switch. The practice of posting was helping me find my voice. And then there were 2 things that happened as a result of that. I was in meetings with people and they would say, oh, I see your links, your posts on LinkedIn. And there was reciprocity. You could tell they felt like it was a warm relationship. They were already talking to me, even though I never talked directly with them until that moment. The second thing that happened was I was able to process my intentions creatively more quickly because these were concepts that I thought deeply about. So I would go for my walk in the morning. I would be jotting down here 5 ideas of posts I could do. I would be taking 30 minutes, an hour, working on a post, whether it be text, image, video, whatever, and posting it. And that practice was giving me reps on how I communicate. And why does that matter? It's great for branding. But when I was now in these creative conversations with people, looking at how I could serve them as a freelancer or within my business, I was able to say with a great amount of clarity, here is how we get from A to B to C. Here's where we're at right now. I was able to bring them into a process, a well thought out process, which is very comforting for them because they're like, I don't know how audio works. Like, can you guide me? Can you show me how I can be successful in this? I was able to work them through a process that they then derived that value from and ultimately helped us get to the best results or better results quicker. Yeah, anyways, rant over. That's the thing.
I love it. That was brilliant. Also, when it comes to more impersonal stuff as well, I think the same thing goes. I love the donut story because I've had messages, and there was something on Airwiggles recently actually, which was I think shared on Twitter and then reshared here, which is basically like, which was a little bit of a rant on how to approach people. And I get a lot of messages that just start with like, hey, or how are you doing, or something. And it's like, you already know that you're going to eventually get some further questioning on something, right? It's an inherent transaction at some point, whether
Yeah.
that be knowledge or whatever. But it's really hard to respond to those, and I often don't if it's just a hey or just I try to always respond to all messages, but it's just like, okay, this is going to take like way more extra effort to actually just get to the point. And I think that's where the communication part of what you just said is also so important, is how you approach people, kind of bring the donuts in, that opens the door, and then you
Yeah.
can give the message, and that is usually just like, hey, thanks for doing this or that. And when you're at a live event, what you can do is like, hey, can I buy you a drink later and maybe ask you some questions about this or that. Stuff like that is awesome and much appreciated. And I think most people, especially when they're at a live event, enjoy having a drink bought for them, especially because we're all, even though when you look at your audio directors and whatever, it can be like, woo, which I'm still, I'm the same. I meet people and I'm like, oh my God, like, you worked on this.
And
But
I think that's sorry, you should keep going. I just interrupted
no,
you.
no,
I think that this is where service is so important. This word has become increasingly important to me as a creative. When somebody sends you a message that's just like, hi, and you're like, okay, like, do I have to draw it out of you now? Like, hi, how are you doing? I'm doing well. Thanks for asking. Like, think about your audience. Now, this goes for both branding, marketing, and then what we make as creatives, which is maybe where we can tilt some of the conversation here. Branding and marketing, you have to think about, okay, if I'm sending a message to an audio director that gets 100 messages like this, that is really busy, and they're not mean, they're not cruel, they're just really busy. They're swamped and stressed, and they're trying to fulfill on what their clients need and like all of this stuff. What can I do that actually makes it easier for them? And by saying hi and then expecting them to take time out of their, maybe they've worked 8 hours that day, maybe they've worked 14, and then they need to go back to their partner and their family, and they need to give energy to so many things. And you're a vampire. I mean, not to offend anybody. If you've sent a hi message, I get it. We're all learning, we're growing, but like, don't be a vampire. Be somebody who's bringing something to them. Don't make them have to give you, from go. As it tilts into creativity, why is the word service so important? Knowing who you are serving, why you are serving them, and what you are serving them with gives you the greatest gift we have as creatives, and that is clarity. And when you don't know who you're serving, we'll default to ourselves. I get it. I'm a selfish person as well, you know. We default to ourselves. So we say, like, I don't know, what am I going to make? What just suits my fancy today? Like, how do I feel today? What is it I want to chase today? Like, I'm going to make that. When we don't know who we're serving, we default to that. When we don't know why we're serving, we go off in all kinds of creative tangents that are just all over the place, right? We have to know why. What is the intention of this moment? What do we want someone to feel? You have to figure out why you're serving them. And then the kind of what or what are you serving them with? That's where it's a question about, like, you know, where do I want their focus to be? Like, where do I want to create momentum or direction or character or story? You know, how am I going to deliver that? And suddenly you get to go into the creative process and think deeply about those things, but you can do so with clarity, which I'll let this open up another topic, the topic of writer's block, which, Greg, I'll let you guide as to which of these paths you want to go down right now with our time. Or I guess,
Yeah.
you know, we're at time, aren't we?
Unfortunately, I think yeah we have to probably do this on another conversation because we've got a talk straight after this. Unfortunately, which I wish we would have had some buffer room.
It's all
Um,
good.
but I think you know what we definitely have to do is do another one of these because there's so much to explore and yeah, and also I just want to also mention what Sarah said in the chat. Although when you are a woman, unfortunately, the drink thing can send mixed messages, and
Mm,
I totally get that. I think this is not something for me to answer because I'm the wrong person to answer this. But definitely also something that I think you know it's important to mention it and highlight it because it is different navigating this world as a woman than a man, and we've had a bunch of awesome women on
hmm
panels in this whole conference as well, and it's really good to have experiences from different people. And yeah, I just wanted to
hmm
highlight your message.
That's
But
great.
yeah, David, I wish we could go longer. This is every month as well. It's the same thing. It's like always we reach the time, we go over a
Yeah.
little bit, and I'm like, oh, more
Well,
time.
well, I just want to say thank you again for having me in this, Greg, and thank you for just the community that you're helping creating an ecosystem so that community can flourish and thrive. And even just the note that you made there about the one lady's comment, it's like, how amazing is it that we get to be a part of a community where we get to talk at that level and be like, oh yeah, I didn't think of that. Like, thank you for sharing your voice. That's such a gift. And Greg, I just know you and the team are so intentional about bringing that to this. And so thank you for involving me in this conversation, for helping foster this beautiful community. And then we'll just catch up another time.
100%. Yeah, we'll do another one of these, and maybe we can. Yeah, people seem to really enjoy it today, which is awesome. So I definitely wanna do this again. Maybe we can do a special edition of this at some point after the conference
Mm-hmm.
and do
Thank you,
some more.
everybody, for coming. I really appreciate you taking your time to be with us here, to share your thoughts in the comments. I know we didn't get to everything that was there, but so appreciate you and then what you bring to this community, because ultimately this doesn't exist without your contributions. So it's amazing. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
100%. And also, please, everyone, do like David said. David is excuse me, my nose is hay
All
fever.
good. All
David is
good.
mainly on LinkedIn, so please do give David a follow. The stuff that he shares is absolutely incredible, really inspirational, and yeah, and hopefully we'll see you a little bit on Airwiggles as well, every
Mm-hmm.
now and then again. Um,
Absolutely.
yeah. Anyway, thank you everyone. I'm gonna end the stream here. I hope you all have an amazing day, and thank you again, David.
Bye,
And
everybody. Thank you for coming.
see you soon. Bye bye.